Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new release. We've got ourselves a Haolonggood release, as we have their Diplodocus, and as you can see, because we don't have the best shot of the box, there are 3 different variants that are out for this incredible looking Diplodocus, and what's cool, I actually have all 3 here, so we get to take a look at all of them at once. As far as the packaging goes, of course, it's the standard stuff. You can see up here on the top, you have basically a checklist with a whole bunch of other Haolonggood releases. And if we turn this gigantic box around, it's all for nothing because it's the same thing in the back pretty much, except for, again, the positioning of the logos is just a little bit different. So we're going to go ahead, pop this giant box open, and we'll bring in all 3 of our different Diplodocus. So there we go, there are all 3, you can't really see one there in the back, but all 3 different versions of the Diplodocus straight out of the packaging, and I am absolutely floored with how beautiful these are. Also, how large they are. I was not prepared for them to be quite as big as they are, so that's definitely a good thing if you like large sauropods in your collection. Haolonggood definitely doesn't hold back when it comes to that aspect. The paintwork also looks really nice on all 3 from what I can see so far, except for one area, and it is an area that I actually kind of complained about previously with the Haolonggood figures, but overall they are still by far 3 of the best, if not the 3 best Diplodocus on the market. So I'm going to readjust the camera here, take 2 of the 3 out, and we'll check 1 out and then move on from there. So starting here in the head sculpt of the Diplodocus, you can see the head sculpt is absolutely fantastic. The skin texture looks really, really nice and really vibrant. The paintwork as well is very nicely done here in the head sculpt. By the way, we are checking out the green one first, just so you know which one we are starting out with, but we can see a good bit of variation of color here in the face with different tones of oranges. You can even see a little bit of like some brownish tones there under the eye. The eye is painted with a yellow, given a nice black pupil. We as well have a darker tone. I'm going to try to get that into screen here nicely, but a darker tone on the beak that it doesn't want to focus on. It's having a really hard time. There we go. So you can see a darker tone on the beak. You can also see the nostrils right there. A little bit of dry brushing over the beak, as well as a nice bluish tone that moves up and over the top of the head. Again, the paintwork looks really nice. The skin texture looks really nice. It overall is a phenomenal looking head sculpt for our Diplodocus. We can also see the ears right there. As we move back, we actually pick up a blue stripe, and that blue stripe kind of turns into like a squiggle, but then runs down the neck before disappearing and tapering off. And here is the area that I was just speaking of that I think is definitely something that Haolonggood could probably work on moving into the future, and that is the paintwork there of the spines on the top. The paintwork of those spines is pretty consistently sloppy, I've noticed, when it comes to these figures, and it really is sloppy on this one, even so much so that some of the paint actually ran down onto the back of the neck. And that is a shame, because otherwise I think the paintwork is phenomenal on this, but that one area seems to be that like specific spot that Haolonggood seems to kind of struggle with. As you move down here into the underside of the neck, we can see again all of the skin texture looking really nice. Very smooth transition down to that lighter tone of the underside of the neck. As you move down through the neck on top of that bluish tone, you also have some darker kind of brownish tones, as well as some spots and stuff that move throughout. The skin texture continues to look really well done. As we continue to lead down, you start to see some transitioning in colors as we lead through into more of like greenish tones, as well as some more light tones and stuff, even like almost like light yellowish tones that you can see there, with a little hint of like an orange or a pinkish tone. Kind of starts out with an orange, but transitions to a pink as you move further down there toward the chest of our gigantic sauropod. But as you move through, again, the skin texture continues to look really, really impressive. You've got all sorts of skin wrinkles and folds as you move down. Some more spots and stuff as you lead through. The spots just become a lot more obvious as you move further down through the body. You can really see them now in comparison to the greenish tones of the body. As we continue to move down, we still see some serious sloppiness when it comes to the paintwork of these spines, and not only that, but the paintwork is so questionably, I guess you could say, or even maybe poorly applied, that it definitely looks more like paint on the figure rather than body color. And on some of the figures, when you have like a smaller model, it's not as obvious with the sloppiness of the spines, but it's really, really obvious on this one. But as you move down, again, you see the greenish tone. It's fairly kind of darkish in this area, but it lightens up drastically as you move into the stomach. The skin texture, again, in the stomach looks really nice. You can kind of make out the shoulder blade right here as you move through. Leading down, you've got some skin wrinkles here back behind the leg. Of course, skin wrinkles there in front of the leg, even leading up here toward the neck. As you move down into the leg, you can see the skin texture looking really nice, and they did a very good job of highlighting some of the scales moving down. Of course, we transitioned to a darker brownish tone for the leg and even down into a gray for the feet, but you can see a little bit of like a dry brushing technique that's been applied there in the leg, which looks really good. And then moving down into the foot sculpt, we'll just look at the other one there. You can see the nail off to the side, as well as, again, the grayish tones for the foot sculpt looking pretty good. Moving back up, again, you have a little bit more of that pinkish tone right here. I also really like that very kind of reptilian style scale detail there for the underside of the dinosaur. As you move up, again, all sorts of really beautiful greenish tones and brown spots throughout. You can see some more skin wrinkles as you lead closer back to the thigh. Moving over here, we can see the hip bone right there. Again, some osteoderms and stuff up there toward the back of the dinosaur. The ridges, which continue to vary in size as you move through. Leading down through the rear leg, we've got the muscle definition very nicely shown off that my camera's going to not focus on. You actually have some variations of darker greens in this area. You even have some pinkish tones on the back of the thigh, as well as the skin stretching really nicely all the way down to the back of the kneecap. We have the kneecap itself right there in the front of the leg. And again, the same sort of style of paintwork where we transition to a brown and then down into a gray, although the gray definitely reaches up further into the leg here on the back leg. You can see the claws very nicely sculpted out and painted with a dark tone. And we also have a light wash down here in the rear leg when it comes to the foot area. And then we lead up, and of course we've got all sorts of skin wrinkles and folds and stuff as you lead through. You have more of those really nice greenish tones and kind of like a light yellowish tone as you move through the tail. And then as we continue to move all the way out here, you can see the darker tones kind of turn into like a striping effect as you lead out there into the tail. And then in something that is quite common for Haolonggood, we actually transition to an orangish tone out there for the ending of that whip-like tail, but we still have some of the browns that now spot through that very nice looking whip-like tail. We also have like some ridges and kind of like some spikes out here at the end of the tail, which is quite interesting. But the tail is, of course, being a Diplodocus, it is absolutely so long, which can be a danger when it comes to stuff that you might have off to the side. If you are like me and you have stuff here that you review, but you have tons of other stuff off to the side, that tail can definitely take some stuff out. But as you move through, you'll see the sculpt looking pretty close to the same, especially when it comes to the tail. Obviously, leading up from the tail, it looks pretty much the same over here, because when you look at it from above, there's a little bit of a curve and stuff, but it's not like super, super different. But as you move back, again, you see the greenish tones and stuff start to creep in. You can see all sorts of really slight, subtle variation of color throughout the course of the figure, as well as a brown that follows along the spinal column. And then you move down, you've got some skin wrinkles and folds back here behind the thigh. Again, some darker and lighter shades of greens there in the front of the thigh. We transition down to the gray again for the foot back here. We can obviously see how this foot is picking up off of the ground, about to take a step as the dinosaur is walking by. The skin stretching off of the stomach right here again. All sorts of skin wrinkles and folds as you move back up toward the stomach. You have that lighter tone again as you lead up here, that really light green, as well as all of the osteoderms and some brown spots and stuff throughout. And then you lead back here, you've got a few more skin wrinkles here in front of the leg. We can see some nice tensing in this leg as it's about to plant down on the ground again as the dinosaur's taking a step. You have the darker tones as you lead down into the feet, and all those different variations of greens and browns and stuff as you lead along. I'm trying not to hit stuff over here to the side, so a little distracted because that tail's so long, but you lead up, and again, pretty much the same thing going on as you lead back up there toward the head. The dinosaur does have its head turned toward us, which you can now see. Again, doesn't want to focus, but you can see how the dinosaur is basically turning its head slightly toward its right. So that's the green variant. Now, of course, the sculpting of all of these figures is exactly the same. We just have different color variants. So this one is the bluish version, and we can see again, starting in the head, you have some variations of browns, especially as you get closer to the beak and then up and over the top of the head. But you've also got some really dark blues and even some light dry brushing, it looks like, as you move through the face. We as well, of course, have a yellow eye for this one and some orangish tones on the underside of the neck and throat. But as you move back here into the body, you start to pick up all those different variations of lighter and darker blues that kind of pattern down. You also have like white spots that you'll see all throughout the course of the figure, as well as a slightly different shade of color following along the spinal column. And we do have those ridges, of course, again up here on the back of the body, painted with an orangish tone, and they don't look nearly as sloppy, I think, as far as the paintwork goes on this one as they did on the greenish one. Still a little bit, but not that bad, so that's definitely a plus for this one. But as you move down, again, you've got all of those different spots, as well as the blue, the dark blue patterns, and some of the lighter tones. As you move along the underside of the throat, you have kind of like those orangish tones down here, a lighter tone that transitions to like the orange as you lead down. Moving into the chest and stuff, you can see again that we basically have those very nice lightly applied orangish tones. And as you move down here along the underside, I actually didn't show the underside of the other one. The skin texture is super vibrant, really impressive the entire way through, and definitely pops really nicely. You can see a lighter tone in the center of the belly, but then the kind of like orange and pinkish tones on the outer edges, and then you also have the cloaca back here for the dinosaur, which is, of course, definitely a great thing to have. Stuff like that, really minute details, making sure it's very nice and accurate. But as you move back into the body, it pretty much follows that same trend of different variations of lighter and darker shades of color with the different blues and stuff, as well as the whites that kind of spot and pattern all throughout the body. As we lead down into the leg, we do transition again to a grayish tone, pretty much the same tone of gray we had on the green version as you move down into the feet. And of course the same thing here for the rear foot, and you can again see that light wash that has been applied to that rear foot. As you move back up, again you've got all of that same variation of color, and as you lead out here toward the tail, you can see again the lighter tones start to kind of overtake the tail. The darker tones break up into more of like a striping effect, and we actually transition again to an entirely different tone of color. If I can turn this into a position where we can really get the tail in. So you can see we have like some really dark brownish tones and then the light tone there kind of in between, and we have that striping effect leading the entire way out there through the tail. And again, we move back into the body, and you can see all of those really cool bluish tones and the white spots and stuff as you move through. So the blue Diplodocus is also gorgeous. And then we have the brownish version for the final Diplodocus, and you can see again, same sculpt as I said before, but starting here in the head sculpt, you have the nice variations of browns. You can see lighter tones as you move down here closer to the jaw, and then again that darker tone as you move into the beak with some dry brushing. We kind of have like an orangish tone that moves up and over the top of the head right there. A yellow eye just like the others. As we move back here into the neck, again you've got like orangish tones and brownish tones and lighter tones as you move along. You can see some of the browns kind of spotting down. We have the ridges again painted along the back with the white, kind of like we had seen on the greenish version. And although they aren't quite as sloppy as the other one, you can see they are still a little bit sloppy. In some areas don't really have paintwork, and some areas do have paintwork, but it's not all that well applied. But as you move down, the rest of the figure still looks magnificent when it comes to the paintwork. We have a brownish tone following basically around the spinal column there, down through the back of the dinosaur, and then we have like the lighter tone moving down, really smooth transition down. We can also see all of the different spots and patterns as we move down. This one is probably the most different when it comes to the overall designs and patterns compared to the other two. As you move further down into the body, just like with the greenish version, we start to lighten up. But what's actually cool is you can kind of see, like at first when you look at it, it almost just looks like a, you know, like an off-white or something. But there's actually a really light bluish tint in here, which does look pretty cool. And I always have to hand it to Haolonggood. They come up with some of the, you know, more flashy color schemes for sauropods that always somehow look really natural. I often find myself kind of like at a loss when it comes to different color schemes that look good on sauropods but still look natural but kind of still have a little flashiness to them. Haolonggood is fantastic at giving them those type of color schemes. As you move down, you get more of like that vibrant orangish brown down here. As we move down, you can even see light hints of greens and stuff. Also, a pretty cool looking variation of a brown as you move down through the front leg that again transitions to a gray moving down into the foot sculpt, and you can see that darker gray there for the claw. And also, again, just like with the others, again, that dark gray for the rear foot with that light wash and stuff as you move down, highlighting all of the detail. As you move back up, you have a little bit of a lighter tone here in the stomach, and again, more of those orangish browns with more of those dark brown spots over the blues, but those light blues taper off and disappear, moving back here toward the leg. And again, you have pretty much the same style of coloration moving down through the rear leg here with the lighter tone kind of following along the back of the leg. And then as we move up, more of those patterns and stuff, we start to see the orangish browns kind of turn into a striping effect with the browns, those like darker brown spots and stuff sort of following along. And just like with the others, as we lead out, we basically turn that into a striping effect, and then with a very dark striping as you move out there into that whip-like tail. If we turn it around, we might be able to get a better look at that. There you go. You can see again how the striping, focus camera, the striping looks as you move out through the rest of the tail, again with the lighter tones and then the darker sort of stripes. And as we move back through this side of our Diplodocus, you can see again it looks just as gorgeous as it did on the first side. Again, another phenomenal color scheme. All three of these are just absolutely out of this world beautiful when it comes to the color schemes that they've chosen. And for the most part, outside of the ridges moving along the back, the paintwork is just beyond fantastic. The only thing I can say that I feel like they are missing is a dark wash, which sometimes Haolonggood does apply, sometimes they don't apply it. These ones unfortunately do not have that dark wash. So I'm actually going to have to figure out one to take out of here, or I mean one to bring in and two to take out so that I can measure it. So for a size, if we go from the snout of the Diplodocus all the way out here to the tip of the tail, about 29 inches or around 74 centimeters roughly. And then for a height, I'm going to have to readjust the camera. I knew it. Height up here to the top of the head, you are going to see this Diplodocus come in at just shy of 9¼ inches or almost 23½ centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to this gigantic Diplodocus, and as you can see, it is definitely very, very sizable, and of course one of the larger sauropod models out there. I would most definitely say outside of like the Mattel Diplodocus, it's the biggest Diplodocus that I have. And then when it comes to a comparison with one of the more popular versions of this species, here is the Eofauna Diplodocus, which we can see is quite a bit smaller. Here is the classic Diplodocus from the Carnegie collection, which you can now see is closer in size, but definitely still a bit smaller. Now here is the comparison I was most interested in with the Rebor version, because the Rebor Diplodocus is actually quite huge. But I can say confidently that although the Rebor version is pretty close in size, the Haolonggood version is still a bit bigger. And then we've got one of the random Haolonggood sauropods with the Brachiosaurus here. Haolonggood is pretty much like the king of the sauropods at this point, but you can clearly see that the Brachiosaurus is significantly larger. So although this is a very large Diplodocus, some of the sauropods from Haolonggood are just beyond gigantic, and there's even larger ones, significantly larger than the Brachiosaurus. But overall, it is definitely a really nice, very sizable Diplodocus. So again, Haolonggood is just on such a roll, and they have been for so long. The Diplodocus is fantastic. From head to tail, sculpt-wise, it is by far one of, if not the best, Diplodocus models on the market anywhere. It is such a striking model. One of those models you can say is a head turner, because I feel like if you have it in your collection and you bring somebody in, it's instantly going to draw their attention in. It is that beautiful. The sculpt and pose and everything is also really nice. You've got like just that classic Diplodocus look. You've got the ridges along the back like you usually see, and also that nice whip-like tail, which is super long for the model. Again, all of the defining features of Diplodocus that we know and love. We also have 3 different color variants this time around, and all 3 are fantastic, all very natural, but still kind of flashy overall, and I think they all look great. A little bit of sloppiness when it comes to the paintwork of the spines on all 3, but nothing on them, I would say, is even close to what would be considered a deal breaker when it comes to the paintwork. I think the paintwork, the patterns, all of that stuff still looks great all the way through with all 3 different versions. So unquestionably a model worth picking up, and in my opinion a must-have. Whether it be just choosing one of the 3 or all 3, they definitely deserve a spot in your collection because they will be your definitive Diplodocus if you grab one. So if you are interested, I will include a link in the description to where you can purchase all 3 from Lana Time Shop. So make sure you check that link, pick them up from there, because that's where I grab mine, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.